happy day.
Oh, happy day.
Oh, happy day.
Oh, happy day.
When Jesus walked. I say when Jesus walked. When my Jesus walked. He washed my sins away.
Oh, happy day.
Oh, happy day.
Oh, happy day.
He taught me how to watch, fight and pray, fight and pray, and live rejoicing every day, every day. Oh, happy day.
Oh, happy
Oh,
day.
happy day.
Oh, happy day.
When Jesus walked. I say when Jesus walked. When Jesus walked. He washed my sins away.
Oh, happy day.
Oh,
happy day. Oh, happy day.
Oh, happy day. Oh, happy day. Oh, happy day.
Well, happy Election Day, everyone. This is our pre-show segment. Little music.
Magic on the internet worldwide.
Well, I forgot that was on there. It seems weird not to start at 9:30. We're starting at 10 tonight, so we'll go ahead with the music for a few minutes. Here's a political Christian America number that we've used before. Let's do Our God and Country Right.
Let's do our God and country right. Let's put our hatchets out aside. Let's put our feelings on the shelf. Love our neighbor as ourselves. Let's do our God and country right.
Let's put the prayer back in the school. Start living by the golden rule.
Count our blessings one by one. Thank the Lord for what He's done. Let's do our God and country right. I remember well the story of George's cherry tree. The pledge, the prayer each morning, and my country 'tis of thee. Now it's a shame they burned Old Glory, and our prayers have ceased to be. We're still using George's hatchet, but we've forgotten George's tree. Let's do our God and country right. Let's put our hatchets out aside. Let's put our feelings on the shelf. Love our neighbor as ourselves. Let's do our God and country right.
Let's put the prayer back in the school. Start living by the golden rule.
Count our blessings one by one. Thank the Lord for what He's done. Let's do our God and country right. America, my home sweet home.
Well, a big finish there. You've heard that before on our bumper music, but that's a good one and appropriate. Not going to be our main theme song tonight, but it's quite appropriate. So this is an exciting time. So let's get all excited.
Excitement. Our world is filled with it. There's excitement in sports and in politics. Now here's a good suggestion. 1, 2, 3, 4.
Get all excited, go tell everybody that Jesus Christ is King. Get all excited, go tell everybody that Jesus Christ is King. Get all excited, go tell everybody that Jesus Christ is King. Jesus Christ is still the King of Kings, King of Kings. everybody that Jesus Christ is King. I said, get all excited, go tell everybody that Jesus Christ is King. I said, get all excited, go tell everybody that Jesus Christ is King. Jesus Christ is still the King of Kings, King of Kings. You talk about people, you talk about things that really aren't important at all. You talk about weather, you talk about problems we have here at home and abroad. But friend, I'm excited about a solution for the world. I'm gonna shout and sing. It's Jesus Christ, he's still the King of Kings, King of Kings. Get all excited, go tell everybody that Jesus Christ is King. Come on and get all excited, go tell everybody that Jesus Christ is King. I said, get all excited, go tell everybody that Jesus Christ is King. Jesus Christ is still the King of Kings, King of Kings.
Oh, yeah. Well, I told the story before, but there was a kid in my neighborhood who I went to church with growing up, and he was a drummer in a little gospel group of adults, even though he was in the 5th grade, and that was his signature song. And it didn't sound much better back then than it does now, but there you go. Well, let's see. Well, here's a classic. The Preacher and the Gourd Vine. We'll go off of politics, and we'll go right to the church.
Well, Jonah went down and he preached and envied them upon the mountain. Old Jonah prayed. God looked down and saw Jonah suffering. God sent a gourd vine and gave him a shake. Well, Jonah let up because he got lazy. He forgot that he had to pray. Then at night, old Jonah was sleeping. God sent a worm and eat the gourd vine away. And a lot of good pastors that the church has given them a salary. Works just like old Jonah's gourd vine gives a preacher a little bit of ease. Some preachers ease up and they won't preach a gospel, afraid that the members might get hurt. Vote him out and get another pastor, and the poor old preacher goes back to work. Come out from and under that gourd vine, preacher, tell people what they gotta do. When you preach, you better preach a gospel, brother. You'll stand in the judgment too. Now don't you let up, just preach it like it's written, and remember that vow to God you made. Come out from and under that gourd vine, preacher. God will send a worm and eat your gourd vine away. Back in the early churches, you can see the sisters coming with their long sleeve dresses just to drag in the ground. God began to bless it and they'd start shouting, their big, long, lovely hair come down. But now they come with their shoulders naked or an awful, awful tight-fitting dress. They want you to know just what they look like, and you won't need no second guess. They preached it straight, I can well remember, 'cause it's only been a few years ago. Preacher told his members right from the pulpit, Christian people didn't go to have cut it and he might have said, well, guess it ain't too wrong. This old preacher would have stuck to his gospel, his sister's hair might have still gone long. Come out from and under that gourd vine, preacher, tell his people what they gotta do. When you preach, you better preach a gospel, brother, you'll stand in the judgment too. Don't you let up, just preach it like it's written, and remember that vow to God you made. Come out from and under that gourd vine, preacher, God will send a worm and eat your gourd vine away.
Well, these things are catching me quicker. I'm not a professional DJ, so that one snuck up on me. Well, this is a peppy number. Some of you have heard it before. You're going to like it, though. Here you go.
Can tell the world about this, you can tell the nations about that, you can tell them what the Master has done, you can tell them what the gospel has come, you can tell them what the victory's been won. He brought joy, joy, joy into my heart. Well, I don't know, but I've been told, yes I have, yes I have, the streets of heaven are paved with gold. Yes they are, yes they are.
Well, my Lord spoke and he spoke to me.
Yes he did, yes he did.
He talked about a man from Galilee.
Yes he did, yes he did.
Well, one of these days it won't be long.
You won't be long, you won't be long.
You'll call my name and I'll be gone.
I'll be gone, I'll be gone. You brought joy, joy, joy into my heart. You can tell the world about this, you can tell the nations about that, you can tell them what the Master has done, you can tell them what the gospel has come, you can tell them what the victory's been won. He brought joy, joy, joy into my heart. Well, my Lord spoke and he spoke to me. Yes he did, yes he did. Well, he talked about a man from Galilee. Yes he did, yes he did.
Well, one of these days it won't be long.
It won't be long, it won't be long.
You call my name, but I'll be gone.
I'll be gone, I'll be gone.
Well, Jordan's water is chilly and cold.
Yes it is, yes it is.
It chills the body, but not the soul.
Not the soul, not the soul. You brought joy, joy, joy into my heart. You can tell the world about this, you can tell the nations about that, you can tell them what the Master has done, you can tell them what the gospel has come, you can tell them what the victory's been won, you can tell them what the Master has done, you can tell them what the gospel has come, you can tell them what the victory's been won. He brought joy, joy, joy into my heart. He brought joy, 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 joy. He brought joy, 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 joy. He brought joy, 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 joy.
Big finish coming there.
He brought joy, joy, joy into my heart.
Well, I told you it was a big finish, and it was. So let's go a little more, move out of the Southern gospel genre to something a little more, soulful. Here we go.
Tell me what, Lord, you
if you don't like that, you don't like music. And, well, we like music around here. Well, this next one, it's got two things to say about it. One, it goes out to our friend John Piper. And two, it's one of the little-known genre of sort of 60s beat music, British invasion type Christian music. And I didn't know it existed, and most of you didn't either. But here we go. Don't waste your life.
Don't waste your life, don't toss it away. You can know real life today. Yield to God, let Him have His way. Don't waste your life, my friend. You will lose in the end. Life is so short. The years slip by. What have you gained at the end? When years have flown and you look back, what will you see, my friend? Without the Lord, you get nothing at all. Life's been achievements, but credit all is small. Don't waste your life, don't toss it away. You can know real life for today. Yield to God, let Him have His way. Don't waste your life, my friend. You will lose in the end. And life spins out its mystic way, spread before our searching eyes. We peer into the mystic gloom to just see where our path lies. Your future life is uncertain on your own. You need a guide, don't try to go it alone. Don't waste your life, don't toss it away. You can know real life today. Yield to God, let Him have His way. Don't waste your life, my friend. You will lose in the end. Don't waste your life, don't toss it away. You can know real life for today. Yield to God, let Him have His way. Don't waste your life, my friend. You will lose in the end. You will lose in the end.
Well, how about multiple time changes, couple of endings, and that one to be only 2 minutes and something long is quite a journey, quite a trip. Well, here's another one in pretty much the same genre that I wasn't aware of, but terribly interesting. This was, I didn't know there were a lot of premillennialists in England, but here you go.
Everybody's gonna pray on the very last day when they hear that bell ring the world away. Everybody's gonna pray to the heavens on the judgment day. Now you can sing about your great King David, you can preach about the wisdom of Saul, but the judgment falls on all mankind when the trumpets have called. All equal and the same when the Lord it calls your name. Get ready, brother, for that day. Everybody's gonna pray on the very last day when they hear that bell ring the world away. Everybody's gonna pray to the heavens on the judgment day. Well, one day soon all men will stand. His word will be heeded in all the land. Men shall know, men shall see. We all are brothers and we all are free. Mankind was made of clay, each of us in the very same way. Get ready, brother, for that day. Everybody's gonna pray on the very last day when they hear that bell ring the world away. Everybody's gonna pray to the heavens on the judgment day. Lord have mercy.
Church is back. At home means it's my turn to talk.
Well, the lie is given and the lie is known. The tale is told and the seed is sown. From dust we came, to dust we'll go. You know the Lord, He wants not us more. Each brother take his hand, heed the meaning of the Lord's command. Get ready, brother, for that day. Everybody's gonna pray on the very last day when they hear that bell ring the world away. Everybody's gonna pray to the heavens on the judgment day. Judgment day. Judgment day.
Well, I faked Resby out with those air horns for effect. We're not in the podcast portion yet, but Resby, are you there? We'll do a little audio check since I threw you for a loop there.
Yeah, I'm here.
Oh, great. You sound good. Okay, well, let's...
It's amazing what you can get done when you have electricity running to your house.
That's right. Well, we're glad that Resby's back in the 20th century, at least. So, well, right now I'm going to play, I know it's one of Resby's favorites. We've used it as a stock theme, but it's too good not to play.
I love to call Jesus' name because we said He would. Well, now there's a man, and that is why. Wonders to behold, how He plants His footsteps on every way, and He lightens every load. When He speaks my name, when the battle is tough, oh, I got Jesus, and that's enough. That's why. That's why. That's why. That's why. Let me call His name. I love to call Jesus' name because we said He would.
Well, it never gets old, does it, Resby?
Oh, it's like church twice on Sunday and once in the middle of the week.
Yeah, I've got that one on the board somewhere, but I don't know if I can lay my hands on it. Well, it's 9:56. I'm going to play another quick one. When I was growing up in the Memphis area, at least within an hour of Memphis, there was a, I guess I now know it to be a syndicated gospel music program, but we would watch it on Sunday morning, or it would be on. And this was the early 70s, Terrible Outfits. but it was called the Gospel Music Jubilee. And here's the theme song.
Praise the Lord, I've been invited to a meeting in the air. Jubilee, 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 Jubilee. And the saints of all the ages in their glory will be there. Jubilee, 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 Jubilee. You're invited to this happy Jubilee. Jubilee, Jubilee, Jubilee. You're invited to this happy Jubilee.
Well, you all invited to this happy or not so happy or lamentful Jubilee. But Resby, we're about ready to kick it off. Any notes or comments before we get going?
Hold on to your butts.
Okay, what movie is that from?
It's old Jurassic Park.
Okay, I never saw it.
Oh, wow.
You
teed that one up just so that you could hit the driver with that. We haven't even started and already bringing out the big guns.
I know it's a thing. I know that remark is a thing, but I really did never see that movie. A, I don't like gore, and B, it was just way too popular for me. So, well, let's see. It's 9:58. I'll horn you in at about a minute in. Recorder's rolling. We, of course, are already live on YouTube. You all stand by. We'll have a few guests strung out over the hours, and we'll be sharing your comments and may even invite a few of you to join us on air. So we'll do a little silence. We'll start the real theme song, and then we'll be off to the races.
This whole world is filled with disappointments and trouble every day. Many times I get discouraged and I almost lose my way. Then I remember I'm just a pilgrim in this unfriendly world below. That's the reason I keep singing as I go. We're not home yet, children, so keep your eyes on the Savior. Just a few more days to labor, and we'll sit down beside the river. How we've longed to be with Jesus, and our loved ones gone before us. There's a better day coming, we're not home yet.
Well, welcome to the live lament. This is Presbycast. I'm Presbyterian. I have electricity. I have internet. One or both of those things I did not have at different times last week. So thanks to Chris Drew for filling in last week to help us out on that show. But this is the Presbycast Live Lament 2020 Election Night Special, where, we're just going to read tweets all night. We're just going to go an hour at a time. Each one is going to read off of our... each one is just going to read off of our, Twitter timelines and just read out loud what we think the best tweets of the night are.
Well, that's not true, of course. Speaking of Chris Drew, our fill-in host, how do you rate his performance?
So I hold his episode the way I hold all other Presbycast episodes, and that's I only listen to the ones I'm present for. So I admit I haven't actually gone back and listened to it yet. It's actually been a little bit of a hectic week, but
I knew that was your answer without even asking it.
Yeah, well, listening to anything from pre-election in I guess what maybe the post-election void is always kind of risky. It's like looking back at photo albums before COVID. But tell us a little bit about what we're looking at on our screen here. If you're
well, I was going to ask you. I've been so busy that I haven't really followed it. I think the big news is that Trump has won Florida. It's pretty evident. I think that's kind of a big deal. Let's see. This map has finally called it. Yes, and this is the Decision Desk HQ site, which is well, there's no ads on it, so you won't see everything I've been shopping for recently. That was a problem with some other sites, and this one's very clean. But I'm sure the listeners who are watching TV with one eye and following Twitter in a way that we can't will have information for us too, and they'll probably break more news than we will.
Yeah, I like Decision Desk HQ. I've sort of followed them for a little while now. Once they really kind of got off the ground, well, a little bit before 2016 was when they really made a name. But I think at this point, just kind of looking off of it, I sort of saw them as the Presbycast of elections, as they saw that other people were doing something a certain way. And they said, hey, we think that we can do this too and do it a little bit better. And right now, much like us, they're just raising red flags all over the place, it seems like. So it's going to be a crazy one. But I like the site. And again, there's no ad. It's very nice. They to take all the care in making it correct. Your intrepid host here.
Okay. Well, as you break up a bit, we're going to bring in our first guest. He was a little noisy last time, but this is our Covenanter, our RPCNA correspondent, Phil Pockrass. Are you there, Phil?
I am.
So, are you anywhere near Amish country?
Yeah, we have some Amish right around us. There are 3 groups, so-called New Order Amish, and they have rubber tires, and they have telephones. We've got some moderately tighter ones to the east of us, and down to the southwest of our county, we've got some very, very conservative, or as they would say, low Amish. So, yeah. Now, we haven't had, like, apparently in Lancaster County, Pennsylvania, a horse-drawn Trump train, but we have had one here in our little village. It's been 2 Saturdays ago, about 50, if we can dignify them this way, 50 units, little street legal golf carts, few cars and pickups and all that. And in our county seat about 2 weeks ago, there was a big Trump train that went along, best part of a mile. So, for our area, that's quite something. So this is fairly heavily Republican area. The famous, or some would say infamous, Representative Jim Jordan is our congressman.
But no Amish in the Trump trains.
Not around here. Not like in Lancaster County, Pennsylvania. No.
Yeah, we tweeted some of those photos to great amusement of the citizenry today. So remind us again where you are. Is it Ohio or Pennsylvania?
Yeah, we are in western Ohio. If you know your Ohio geography, if you take a line between downtown Toledo and downtown Cincinnati, we're about smack dab in the middle, about 2 counties away from the Indiana line.
Okay. All right. Well, you are an RPCNA pastor. Recently moved into recently moved into a new building.
Yes, sir.
So tell us a little bit about the RPCNA stance, both currently and historically, on participation in military service, government affairs, voting, all that sort of thing.
Well, currently it is it's not quite like in the book of Judges where there was no king in Israel or no king at synod. Every man does what is right in his own eyes, but there are different understandings of the way that our testimony says things. And most people, well, an awful lot of people are voting for the least problematic, at least as far as they can tell. Historically, our stance has been that the Constitution is an immoral document because it is secular. It does not recognize the crown rights of Jesus, the mediatorial king of nations, as well as the only king of the church. And because politicians and soldiers and jury members and others take oaths to uphold, support, and defend the Constitution of the United States, an immoral document. Historically, we have not served on juries, served as officers anyway in the Army or other armed services, or voted or run for office. So I hold to the old view. So the ballot I handed in today, we had one local issue for a tax, millage on property for our local fire department and life squad. So that was the only thing I voted on. Everything else was a blank ballot that I handed in, and I believe my wife did the same. But not everyone in the RP church would do that anymore. Actually, we have a statement one can make called the here I should have been better prepared. There is a statement you can make that declares your dissent to the Constitution's refusal to name Christ as King of the nation and refusal to use the scriptures as the basis for law. It's called the Explanatory Declaration. And I would vote for any politician who would take that. I've not known of any except myself. I've served one term on village council here using the Explanatory Declaration, and I have served one term on a county grand jury using the Explanatory Declaration. But I don't know how much that confuses everyone, but there we are.
Well, it sounds like y'all are sort of the Amish of Napark.
Well, yeah, we don't, we don't have those mechanical musical instruments, so yeah, but we do have cell phones and rubber tires on our cars, so yeah.
Well, that's good. Well, our friend Daryl Hart just barely has a cell phone. He has a flip phone. Is that right? There you go. There's the flip phone.
He is ahead of both of us when we were together at Westminster Seminary.
Ah. Hello, Phil.
Daryl, how are you?
All right, how are you?
I'm keeping some sanity, thank you.
Well, Dr. Hart, what do you...
Oh, give me a break with the doctor, would you?
Oh, that's the first time, yeah.
Okay.
I'm not going to call you the screen name that you put on the...
Yeah, okay, no, I get that. You could call me Mr. something, but...
Yeah. Well, so how are you feeling on this election day?
Anxious a little bit. Not sure why. I was in some ways more anxious in 2004 with Bush Kerry. I may have said this on one of the episodes, maybe not, but I have told the story where I was up until 3:00 in the morning watching county results from Ohio, which was the major battleground state of 2004. And I don't know why I cared that much, but it's been an odd day. I haven't really had a good sense either way of what might be coming or what I should do. So,
or what the implications of it all are.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, it's strange. Where I predicted to my employee that it would get a little weird in our neighborhood today, and it did. It's first of the month. Everyone's got their checks. That's one thing. It's nearly a full moon, and there were, sure enough, there was some drama. The thrift store next door, threw an employee out who was on chemical substances.
Huh.
There were people yelling and screaming at each other on the sidewalk all morning. So I thought it was going to get weird, and we'll see about tomorrow and tomorrow night and tonight in some cities across the country. But
Yeah,
maybe
today, Hillsdale's a very quiet little town. There, my wife and I tried to vote at the same time before I went to campus, thinking we maybe would have been there when people had gone to work, 9:30 or so, and lines were long. So I needed to get to campus to prepare for class at noon, and then went back and voted with that maybe only a 20-minute wait in the afternoon. Came back to campus for a department meeting where the history department barely even mentioned the election. So it felt like a very normal day on campus and in town, other than going to the library to vote.
well, that's good. Resby, any questions for our friend Dr. Darrell? I'll call that's half informal.
No questions here at this point. I mean, I think one of the things everyone kind of what experience was like. I mean, mine was. I worked the first half of the day on campus, then came home and finished up the day. And typically, I go after work because of the way the polls close. But it's just at our little community center, and there was no wait. I walked right in 2016, and in 2020, I did exactly the same thing. I mean, it was just there zero voter suppression, if I may use the red flag term. But I mean, it was normal. I mean, other than the fact that I had this weird cloth thing over my face. Went in, did the ballot. You know, my wife voted earlier in the day than me, and she gave me the tip that they will ask you to use hand sanitizer, and you need to barely depress the top of it. Otherwise, it will just multiply like the blob onto you. So, I'm sure there's some other members of my presbytery who would shun me listening to my wife with such reckless. But I did listen to her like the lib that I am, and used a minimal amount of hand sanitizer. Voted, got out, came back home, made spaghetti. Here I am.
All right, Doc. Darrell, do you think they'll be riding tonight or tomorrow or this week if the incumbent prevails?
I just don't know. I would assume in places where the protests have gone on, like Portland, and I can't remember what other cities. I've sort of lost track of following that, absorbed as I am with COVID statistics. But I guess so. I mean, I think businesses that are boarding their windows up would indicate that they. I don't know if that's a good benchmark or not. I mean, it looks so much like people preparing for a hurricane. But also, I tend to wonder too if people just get tired of it and finally kind of accept it, or regroup for something else. But I just don't have a very good sense.
Yeah, I think getting tired of it seems unlikely. I could be wrong, but I think they'll redouble if the result is not to their liking or to our liking or whatever the case may be. Phil, I assume where you live, rioting is unlikely.
Well, in a village of 800 people, no, it takes a little something to get something like that going.
What would that be? What would get that going? What would it take to get a riot going in your town?
Boy, I don't know if they close the convenience store. I don't know. I was just talking to a lady today who was saying that she had gone out and gotten her concealed carry because if Biden gets elected, that'll be gone. I think any rioting that happened around here from leftist people would be, I don't know, it would not be happily greeted. But who knows? Who knows? But yeah, it would take a little something. Maybe if the local pizza joint were closed, I don't know, something like that.
Well, you'd have your very own Pizzagate there. So,
Well, we do.
all right. Well, Daryl, so you say there's, I mean, Hillsdale is noted as a sort of bastion of, I don't know, you might say highbrow conservatism, conservatism with some intellectual heft behind it. But you say there's not a lot of discussion of the election there.
Well, no, not even informally with colleagues or students, which has been sort of surprising. The student newspaper hasn't even featured a lot. They had some interviews with projections, different faculty members, but it's been relatively calm. I wonder. I don't know if that means people are largely of a same mind, and so there aren't reasons to talk. Or, I asked students today, and they had mailed in ballots since they are all away from home, and I think that's a better rate of participation than when I was in college. I don't know that I was voting back then. But again, they didn't seem particularly worked up, anxious about the results. I mean, I think my own reflection today on the election was listening to Glenn Lowry at the Right Show at Blogging Heads on a discussion he had with a couple of other academics about state of higher education. And it made me think back to the results of 2016, which were entirely surprising, as I'm sure they were to most people listening or participating. And in a sense, there was a great relief, because I think the college for 8 years under President Obama had felt that the Federal Department of Education was kind of coming after us in a way, sort of playing games with how they classified us and how they counted our online learning and these sorts of things. And, you know, I think the Department of Education, say what you will about Betsy DeVos, has done a better job with higher education more generally. And I particularly am intrigued by this idea that they're going to investigate Princeton University to see if they really are a racist institution the way they've said they are. So, you know, that was part of my reflection today, but I haven't had many conversations with colleagues along those lines.
Well, as I look at the map there on our screen, it seems to me that it's looking extremely red. I think the crosshatched states they haven't called, but I mean the entire Southeast is looking red at this moment, and Ohio and Pennsylvania. That is that's momentous, if that's accurate. So I wonder if any of our viewers have heard something. But if those states that are considered likely red at this fairly early hour of 10:20 p.m. Eastern, if they all turn red, the election may be over. So if the results we see right now are accurate, we need to think about what's going to happen in the coming days, I think. And Daryl, if you'll pull your mic a little closer to your face,
Sure.
It's just a little bit further out there. And all right, that'll be better. So I don't know. This is much better than watching TV for me. to be able to do this rather than, my wife switched to Storage Wars after about 30 minutes. That was all she could take. And the dog fell asleep, and then she fell asleep. So, not an exciting night around here. But let's think
What
about
what if the Electoral College was an episode of Storage Wars? I mean, let's for a second think like you open up chop off the padlock, move the door up, and it just says Pennsylvania in the background, and then you've just got these electors trying to just bid on these votes. Dave Hester just chiming in, "Yup," all of a sudden from the background.
Well, would it be like the Cook brothers and George Soros bidding for votes? Something
Yeah,
like that.
I mean, there was even a guy named Daryl, on Storage
right.
Wars. So,
he's not the
so,
smartest
we don't
guy.
even have to change. We don't have to change names. So, I mean, I feel like we could do this, and I don't feel like it would be a worse system than what we already have.
So, what do you think the implications are for the next 4 years if Trump wins? Which is, if the map that we have can be trusted, that looks like that's what's going to happen.
Yeah, I guess I still think it's too early to talk about, to contemplate it in a way, especially with the mail-in ballots. And have they been counted yet? Do you have any sense?
Well,
Chortles,
some states quicker than others, yeah, and
yeah.
I don't know how much allowance they're making for it. But actually, the best our Discord server is the best source on this because we've got a number of engaged people following it from different sources, and you can kind of compare those sources. But it sounds like he might even win Virginia, although I don't see that on this map.
Right.
I think there's, the first real election that and I referenced it. I'm not. I guess I was just on a work call, but everyone remembers those weird 8 minutes where we thought John Kerry was the next president, and I don't think anyone is I don't think anyone is being too overly cautious when they say they want to avoid that happening again. But I do think election day voting is going to skew heavily Donald. I know most everyone that I know who was voting that way was quite excited to actually go to a polling place on election day and do that whole jazz.
Well, I've logged into another site, and they're not quite so optimistic. But anyway, so the question is, when will we know? Will we know tonight? Will we know tomorrow? Will we know in late December? That seems like a recipe for disaster and disorder. One hopes that the whatever the result is, that it will be at least clear, not clear and present danger. Phil, have there been any candidates visit your area at all? Because we hear how important Ohio is. But is that just the cities?
Yeah, well, down at my next in brothers, they were in Circleville, Ohio, around the time of the pumpkin show, which is a big wing ding. But
we lost Phil for a minute there. We'll mute him, and we have another guest in who is a Politico. That's old Forfair. Are you with us, Forfair Davis?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yep.
And you're on with Phil, if he makes it back in, and Daryl Hart. So what do you see, Forfair? Are you with
Well,
us?
it looks an awful lot like 2016 at this point, which I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, we got you.
We may be
Great.
experiencing some
It
internet
looks a lot
overload,
like
but yes.
2016 to me, which isn't. No. But that doesn't necessarily mean that Trump's going to win. Basically, in 2016, he rolled double sixes. He shot the gap. I don't know if he'll do it again this time.
Yeah, it's. I mean, we kind of just said that. I think it's a little too early, although I am optimistic. If you follow odds, Trump is now at -300. Take that however you wish. That can switch quite a bit. The Atlanta Falcons were also up in the Super Bowl 28-3 at one point. So literally anything happened.
All right, let me unmute Forfair because we had some feedback with him. Have you sensed momentum to Trump in the last few days?
I absolutely did. Actually, the thing I was tracking, and sometimes I posted this on Twitter, I was tracking RCP's battleground states numbers. And those were closing in, and they were really closing in rapidly over the last 24 to 48 hours. And where they cut off yesterday was only about 1 percentage point short of the gap that existed this time in 2016. So it really looked like things were moving in Trump's direction, which implies, to my mind, that there was momentum on the ground. And it was just a question of whether he would be able to close the gap. And that remains to be seen, actually. It just looks close right now, so we don't know.
Now, remind us what state you were in.
I'm in California, so voting here in California basically is a kind of exercise in irony, because we know where California is going to go as far as the election's concerned.
What about civil unrest in your area, protests, things like that?
Nothing's. I've not seen or heard anything that looks particularly ominous, but I will say that schools in certain districts are being closed during this week. That is, the ones that were open are being closed this week, specifically to prevent putting kids in danger. So, but my interpretation to that is that's politicians trying to be overly protective, but that's not to say that nothing will happen. I think Southern California in particular is kind of exhibit A of the sort of anti-Trump suburban movement, and there's a lot of passions in the air, even in places like Orange County, actually. So it's hard to say what'll happen if Trump actually pulls this off.
Yeah, I don't think anyone has a handle on that. Dr. Darrell, what do you expect? How long do you think it'll take for us to get certified results?
Boy, I'm really a novice at this stuff. I mean, I was thinking earlier in the comments about 2000. My wife and I were moving from Philadelphia to Escondido, and as we left December 2nd, something like that, and the election, I don't think still hadn't been decided. We were listening to the headlines on the radio going out. Gore v. Bush, etc. You know, people have talked about that sort of thing possibly happening here. I guess one of the things I was struck by this whole last 2 months or so, even going back into the summer, all of these different campaigns for get out the vote, make sure you vote, that didn't seem to have a pro-Biden message to them, but by coming from celebrities who you probably could think were not supporting Trump. And it just seemed a little bit too strong of a message, or it seemed to suggest a certain kind of insecurity that people really would turn out and vote for Biden. And of course, there would be reasons for that because he's not the most exciting of candidates, whatever his mental capabilities are at this stage in his life. He struck me as sort of the Bob Dole of the Democratic Party, even though I think Bob Dole was sharper than Biden is right now. When Dole ran in 1996.
Well, Bob Dole with more, sort of mobster characteristics.
Well, that's a whole nother I guess I keep wondering what the bias of the media is going to do in all this. And I just don't have enough of a feel for the common person in the United States, since most of the online things I follow are in the academic worlds, and I certainly have a sense of where those discussions are. But I listen to conservative talk radio, mainly coming out of Boston, where WRKO there has a lineup that's a little bit more refreshing than Rush, Sean, Mark Levin, etc. And so you get to hear what people say there, and I listen to sports talk radio and get a little bit of a sense too of the common person there. But they don't really talk about politics on sports talk radio. They talk far more about the virus. So I don't look to me to be in touch with middle America, even though I am living in probably the most isolated or remote place where my wife and I have ever lived. And that's not saying anything bad about Hillsdale or Michigan, but it's just the way it is.
You mentioned Bush versus Gore, and was that 2000 or 2004?
2000. It was Kerry, 2004.
Okay, so 2000. I was around for that. It was sort of a big deal, but it didn't seem like a crisis to the degree that I think this would seem, because there wasn't the huge difference between the two candidates, and you didn't have the identity politics and the racial element, and just this end of the world scenario. So it was quite a bit different.
Right.
Forfair, you probably remember that time. Why is today so much different than 2000? And we've lost Forfair. I feared that some bandwidth issues would come into play tonight. Let's see if he's there. Forfair, I'll try you again. All right, we're having trouble with having trouble with him. And Forfair, if you can hear us, put some earbuds in if you can. That'll kill some of the feedback. And we had our friend Hutch with us. He's dropped off, but he'll be back. Let's see. Phil, there in rural Ohio, do you sense any nervousness about this, or is there really a rural divide that just takes all the anxiety out of this?
Well, as I mentioned, the lady I talked with who was eagerly talking about getting her concealed carry license because if Biden wins, that's all gone. And there are a number of people around here who have been stocking up in ammunition. We don't have any bare shelves in the grocery store due to COVID or anything else. But yeah, there's been a little bit, I think. But overall, it's not been too bad. I myself haven't been given too much thought to it today. I had to have a Zoom meeting for the executive committee of the governing board of Geneva College this morning. And so I was playing around with that. We've got to figure out a few new trustees. And then was kind of trying to keep in mind my older son's fiance was flying in from Portland to Pittsburgh today. Well, she arrived safely in Pittsburgh, and this is the first they've gotten to see each other in 10 months due to the plague. So that was more on my mind in some ways. So, yeah, we don't have the big city problems. And I think I've mentioned before, one of the pros of living where we do is we're only a little over an hour away from Columbus. Contrary-wise, one of the cons we have living here is that we're only a little over an hour from Columbus. So.
Well, Daryl Phil has said that, he hardly even thought about this today. So the question is, how big a deal is it? What's the probable effect on our lives if the incumbent is not reelected? How much is life going to change for the conservative Christian in the USA?
I guess I've thought it would go back in a way probably to the Obama years, which wasn't terrible. It wasn't as if there were infringements upon my denomination or my congregation. As I said, I do think I felt the weight of the Obama administration more when it came to the policies of the Department of Education and what it was doing with Hillsdale. And given, I think, the way the academy has gone over the last 4 years, I'd like to see someone continue to keep some kind of pressure, like the way that Department of Justice, or I guess is making an inquiry with Princeton. I'd like to see something like that, because I do think since the George Floyd death and the protests and the various sort of confessions of guilt that have come out of that, especially in higher education, that it's been really a bad time for universities and colleges. I don't necessarily know. I haven't followed the news enough to see who Biden might appoint if he were president as head of the Department of Education. But it's a really important part of our cultural life, higher education, the universities, the kinds of functions that they play in our society, and it sets a certain tone, especially on these matters of social justice. I really think they should be more responsible and critical in examining these matters, which isn't to say these issues are not real. It's just a question of whether the way that they've been framed are really all that helpful. And so again, as someone, I don't want to talk like I'm just a geek worried about my own profession of academics, but that is my working niche. And, I could see someone working in the auto industry thinking about, well, what is a Biden or Trump administration going to do for them? So it's not unreasonable, seems to me, to think about my own work life and the institutions with whom I have built up a career.
All right, let's see if we can get Forfair back in. If you can hear us, what difference does it make? I mean, is it going to be like everybody's living in California if Biden wins, or is it really that big a deal? And we'll never know the answer because we're not getting forfare there from California. So maybe California is blocking us.
This is Governor Newsom's fault.
There you go. I hear nobody likes him, so we don't like him either anymore. If he's responsible for that,
how could it possibly be that there's better internet service in Michigan, in Hillsdale, than where forfare is in Orange County? That seems inconceivable.
Well, I'll invoke the old Bugs Bunny remark: "Clean living prevailed." Maybe that's what did it. Well, let's see if our friend Hutch can join us. He's sort of a podcaster. I'll bet his audio works. Are you with us, Hutch?
Yeah, how y'all doing, haters?
Hey, and you're in the same state as I am. And
yes, I am.
And you're never at a loss for words. So what do you have for us?
I'm going to be really interested to see how this plays out over the rest of the night. I mean, I've been a little bit behind. The wife and I have been keeping up with the broadcast on Fox News. So it looks like actually what you guys have coming up there with the Votecast desk, whatever it is that you're using there, it looks like they're already calling Georgia, Florida, and North Carolina for the Republicans, which is, as far as I know, Fox is not done yet.
Yeah, I think the networks have been pretty conservative. I mean, conservative in the sense of not getting too far out ahead of the vote counts. And as
Right.
I heard this week, some states, they got their mail-in votes. They get them counted very quickly, and some are going to have a tremendous lag. And
Well-
a good thing that
North Carolina,
networks,
there is. I was going to say, with North Carolina, there is one county that is left, and that's Granville County, just north of Wake, and Orange County, just north of Raleigh, that's waiting to be called. Decision Desk is showing it as that they haven't submitted anything yet, that there's 0 votes counted, 0% in from there. But once that's in, then North Carolina will be called. There's about 60,000 people in that county. Trump has about 50-something thousand vote. So
lead,
impossible
I
to
guess.
say. Well, yeah, 28-3 in the Super Bowl, still very much in effect here. But it would be really, really impressive. North Carolinians, Governor Cooper apparently will be returning to office. I have feelings about that. But the other big race there will be Tom Tillis in the Senate. If he can, if he wins, then that's going to be a pretty, I should say, COVID survivor, Tom Tillis, back from the dead, from COVID-19. So it'll be impressive to see if he can hold off Cal Cunningham for his own Senate seat.
All right, Daryl, to what extent do you think the lockdown? What extent has that affected voters? Do you think? I mean, those who are against lockdowns are probably not going to vote for the candidate who's promised a more extensive lockdown and a nationwide mask mandate, as if that would be constitutional or enforceable. But I mean, I think maybe the media's conventional wisdom was that because COVID is still a thing and people are dying, that everyone would vote against Trump. But it seems to me that people might be voting for more freedom.
Right. And again, it's so hard to read this, but I would say the red on the map you have up there, the red parts of the country, at least certainly parts of those states are pretty fed up with the lockdown policy. I've been listening, thanks to you, Chortles, to London Calling podcast and the Lockdown Skeptic podcast and the Spike podcasts. And the libertarians in Britain are really upset with Boris, and they're going through another major lockdown for 4 weeks. And they haven't had any kind of referendum or election in the process for the voters to indicate how they perhaps feel about all this. So, in my own state of Michigan, it'll be really interesting if the state goes for Trump. Does that mean a rejection of Governor Whitmer? And it's not the way the press has covered Whitmer during COVID. The last polling data I saw, it was like 51% of Michiganders polled favored Whitmer's policies, even though it seemed to be down from earlier in the month, which still left me scratching my head that many people would be in favor of this policy. But again, my experience in Massachusetts this summer was seeing the way people out there were living. They were much more self-conscious, self-aware of the guidelines, everyone wearing masks seemingly everywhere, and churches really abiding by the guidelines, even the OP congregation where we worship. So I do think the virus could actually help Trump out, in odd ways, even though the standard line has been he's so much failed in his execution of policy. That narrative has really gotten stale, but that's the way it's gone.
Well, now we have the Fox News map on the screen, and they seem to be being conservative and cautious, maybe to a fault. That maybe the wisdom of that may be abundantly proven. But I remember, I don't know, at what hour was it apparent that Trump had won in 2016? Seems like 1 a.m., 2 a.m. is my recollection.
It was sometime after midnight. I remember going to sleep once Pennsylvania in 2016 had gone for Trump. Once that had happened, I felt pretty sure that I think my exact words were, again, to quote with Jurassic Park, he did it. The crazy son of a bee really did it. And there we were. 2 Jurassic Park calls in a night. This is my new favorite episode.
Well, Hutch, you're back with us. Further thoughts you have on the election?
Well, at this point, I don't. What's going to happen is clearly not in our hands. It's clearly in the Lord's. What I hope for is that whatever happens going forward, the church is in a position to be able to respond. So whether we're dealing with another 4 years of President Trump and being very articulate about the fact that, at least in some segments of the church, our support for Trump has more to do with support for his policies than support for his personality, and support for the things that he says, which are just awful a lot of the time. The flip side is that if we're facing if we're facing a new 4-year stretch where Biden is president, we need to be prepared for how we're going to respond to things like the Equality Act. How are we going to deal with some of the new pressures that are going to be placed on the church in a Biden administration? And so I think if we've learned anything, at least in my lifetime, is that, politics are very much a pendulum. We go from one end of the spectrum to the other every 4 to 8 years. And so if we are fortunate enough to get 4 years where we aren't facing down something like the Equality Act, hopefully under our current president, then that means we've got 4 years to prepare the church for what's coming. And so sadly, I think that we've been behind the curve there. That's, we've seen this, some of us have seen this coming for a long time. But it seems like the church has not really been paying attention. So, and for Mr. Ted, whatever your last name is, sorry, brother, can't pronounce your last name. No, this is not an Auburn hat. This is the 1947 Atlanta Crackers, which was a baseball team that played at Old Ponce in Atlanta. So I am a Georgia fan, which only the truly elect can say. So no, this is not an Auburn hat.
Well, I can confirm that you are, in fact, a cracker. There is no doubt about that.
So the story is that the team was originally called the Atlanta Firecrackers because they were sponsored by a firecracker company or something in Atlanta. And then over time, the name just got shortened to the Atlanta Crackers. Interestingly, the way that it worked in most cities in the old days was that you before the color line was breached by Jackie Robinson, was you had a baseball team in one town, then whatever the black team was that was there took the same name as the white team in town. And so you did in fact have the Atlanta Black Crackers that were a baseball team in Georgia in the 1930s and 40s.
Well, that's another show, but our friend Daryl is a baseball fan. But the question I have for him right now is, what are we going to hear from our gospel-y friends at the coalition? If it seems to me that if Trump wins, we're going to hear how we should join our neighbors in lament, try to understand their pain and their sorrow. And if Biden wins, I don't know what we're going to hear. Will there be calls to sympathize with the poor, benighted rural souls who just didn't get it?
I doubt that. I think it'll be more on the order of, this is the lesson to you people who voted for Trump. This is what happens when you do that, because you're going to get Democrats in reaction who may be hostile to your own to your convictions. I think it's going to be a teaching moment for Trump, that the Gospel Coalition will try to have a teaching moment for Trump voters. Not that you probably read it more than I do, Chortles, but that just doesn't seem to be the way they operate.
Yeah, I mean, it's. I think the approach that they adopt, it almost, even though they would say they don't advocate for intersectionality or critical race theory, the assumptions are there, that we have to lament if one candidate wins, and there's very little understanding required if the other candidate wins. I mean, if you buy the presupposition that white supremacy is a thing, and that it's clear who advocates for it, then I guess that's a simple call, and it allows plenty of space for self-flagellation and confession and that sort of thing. But ultimately, I don't know what difference that it makes. So it will be interesting to see how some in the more progressive parts of evangelicalism, how they react, no matter which way this goes. Certainly, we'll hear about the sovereignty of God, but I'm afraid the social emphasis and that sort of critical intersectional analysis is going to be there with us too. Resby, what are you seeing? I'm still looking at this Fox map, which is pretty conservative, meaning they're not calling a lot of these toss-up states. I also wonder what any of our viewers are seeing or hearing. One of our Ulster friends says that the BBC is suggesting shenanigans and that there's a possibility of a 269 deadlock. And that sounds like a nightmare scenario. But Resby, what are you seeing in your online perambulations?
Donald Trump now at minus 240 on the particular online odds maker that I follow. So he's still a pretty overwhelming favorite in that sense, but again, that can always change. Looks like I'm totally biased. I'm still waiting for this North Carolina call in a really big way. But it'll be interesting to see. I saw the New York Post said that Philadelphia had basically shut down ballot counting for the night. So we'll see. I think there's just as likely of a chance that this thing goes through the weekend as it does tonight. I think that one thing we can all agree on is that in the spring of 2022, we will all be winners of some sort when the Dwayne Johnson-owned XFL 3.0 returns to the field with all the teams from the second iteration apparently returning, at which point my DC Defenders can rightfully claim the championship they were robbed from by the People's Republic of China when they unleashed the virus upon the world. So I am looking forward to righting some wrongs regardless of what happens.
Notice that we're not talking about wrestling, but we're talking about wrestling on the football field with the XFL. Unbelievable. So, so Daryl, I mean, how tense is it going to get if we don't have a result in 2 weeks?
Well, it'll be intense. Resby, what
yeah.
we gonna...
Oh no, I was probably just going to say the same thing. It will be very intense,
especially on the media side and the social media side of things. And I can't imagine all the stories we will see about shenanigans on both. Well, probably more than one side than the other. From my obsession with the virus, it'll be interesting to see how far off the front page the virus goes during all this. But but again, I think it'll be pretty frenetic, pretty hysterical, with lots of coverage of the way Republicans, both at federal and state levels, are trying to mess with the elections. But I don't, what would happen if there is social unrest during all this? How does the media balance those two stories, or cultivate both those stories? And that's another question.
Resby, can you guys hear me?
Yeah,
you're
with us.
Okay, yeah. So one of the things, Daryl, that you just mentioned that I think is going to be interesting to see how it plays out in relation to the unrest and everything else is the fact that it doesn't seem to me like there's been a real media reckoning yet. Where, if you were listening or watching to the news earlier this week, you were left with the impression that, Florida was a Biden lock. Or that Michigan was a Biden lock, that there was just no way that President Trump was going to be able to win again in 2020. And right now, things are looking like they're in Trump's favor. I mean, that's going to change once the polls close in California, because we can basically, guarantee that particular state is not going to go for Trump. But I'd be interested to know, what do you think that the path forward has got to be for the way that we interact with media? Because at this point, I think if the media has proved anything, it's how deeply untrustworthy legacy media really is.
Well, we do this seemingly every 2 to 4 years, and maybe even sooner, depending on if there's a referendum in the European theater, and that is the polls say all of these things. Election night. Oh my gosh, the polls were wrong. How can this happen? This can't happen again. Fast forward 18 months. Hey, the polls are saying this. Election night. Oh my gosh, the polls were wrong. How can this happen? This can't happen again. We're now about, like, if you include, I think if you include Brexit and then you include the Boris Johnson, referendum. I mean, basically, there's 2016, 2018, those two, and then possibly even now. I mean, you're looking at 5 very large major election cycles where the data is supposed to be good, and it could be completely off. Yeah.
Yeah, there are going to be a lot of pollsters maybe out of work. I mean, I think there's this idea that that Trump has exposed the bias in the media, and there may be a sea change if this election turns out quite a bit differently than expected, and they can't sell the idea credibly of interference or shenanigans. I think overall, from what I heard today, there was very little talk of problem with voting or machines that didn't work or intimidation or anything like that. Daryl, were you surprised at how little news there was, how quiet it was
Right.
all day?
Right. The other side, though, of the media angle is if Biden wins, the legacy or mainstream media may lose some of their advertisers and their readers, because part of what has generated lots of clicks and readership has been negative coverage of the Trump administration. So if they don't have that to cover, what will replace that? I fear it will be more horror stories about the virus. But it'll be curious if Biden does win, what the way that the tone the media will take with that, and how do you keep generating readership and advertisers for that? In some ways, it's a bit of a dilemma for them. Never have those institutions been as popular as they are, I think, during this time, during the Trump administration. It's again this codependent relationship that Trump has with them and they have with him, and they both wind each other up.
It may well be like it was during Obama, when there was nothing but fluff stories and all that, and people get tired of that. There's nothing to it, nothing exciting, nothing interesting.
Well, there's certainly plenty. If Biden were to win, there's certainly plenty to report on with the laptop from hell, as it's called, and I guess some of them could get very interested in that after the fact.
Well, but I also think you kind of had a little bit of a preview of what
Amendment.
I think you had a little bit of a preview of what a Biden presidency in the press would look like when you just see the glowing coverage they gave to Obama when he made that 3-point shot after like a Biden campaign thing. It's just like, oh, okay, so we'll just do that again. Is essentially what we're going to talk about, and kind of go from there. So, yeah, I'm not looking forward to that at all. So, somebody please stop it from happening, please.
Is there anyone
I'm still very much
in
the Go ahead.
I was going to say, is there anybody other than me that has a conspiracy theory brain that genuinely suspects that the reason that like Fox News and some of the other media outlets are waiting to call, Wisconsin and Michigan and Florida and Georgia at this point, or
Florida just called by Fox, FYI.
Okay,
just happened.
Okay, yeah, that wonders if they're not waiting to announce that until after it's obvious, as I think it is on the map, that the entire left coast is going to go for Biden. And it just seems to me a little bit suspicious that they're waiting to call a couple of those states. But then again, like I say, I also have a conspiracy theory brain, so who knows?
Well, so what would it be to Fox's advantage?
In their case, I think it would be to drive viewership when folks start texting around and going like, "Hey, Trump just surged in, Michigan or Wisconsin." And in other cases, I think it would be to, again, send text messages around within folks that lean more left or more progressive to say, "Oh, Trump is, it looks like Trump might win because Biden went up to 207, but now Trump's got Wisconsin and Michigan." And so again, it drives viewership towards them. Because one of the things that we've proved, with the use of social media is that headlines and messages that produce anger drive more attention and drive more clicks. And so part of, at least in my estimation, the reasons that we're seeing legacy media do some of the things that it's doing is that it recognizes that it's a dying form of media. And so it's having to shove traffic in its direction by being the most over the top that it can. And one way to do that in this case would be to continue to hold back some of calling certain states in order to drive their viewership.
Mm-hmm. For what it's worth, I'm looking over at Twitter, and Mickey Kaus, who's a Trump supporter, even though he's an old liberal who used to write for New Republic, and a very thoughtful, funny guy. He does a podcast with Robert Wright at Blogging Heads TV, and he just retweeted a tweet from Andrew Sullivan, who says, "Whatever happens next, this has been a crushing defeat for the left racial identity politics. If Trump wins because of Latino voters, it strikes the heart of an entire worldview."
What is it? Starr County, Texas, the most Latino county in the United States. 2016, Clinton plus 60. 2020, Biden plus 5 with 98% reporting. That is
wow.
Those are massive numbers.
Well, we don't want to troll him too hard, but Anthony Bradley earlier tonight, he's been on Hutch's show. He said he didn't understand why the Cubans were so conservative. I guess that was just a hole in his experience or education. But
at which point, credit to him, third member of Presbycast, Dan Borvin, said, "I guess he hasn't heard of Fidel Castro."
Yeah, apparently not. So
Donald Trump at minus 320 on the bookmaker, just FYI.
I'm going to be down there in Miami for Thanksgiving. I'll be suffering down there, and I hope you'll all remember me while I'm there. But it'll be an interesting conversation that I have with some fairly diverse in-laws down there.
Resby, that bookmaker line. So for those of us who don't understand that number and don't follow it,
so minus 320 would mean if you would have to bet. If we were talking in hundreds of dollars, you would have to bet $320 to win 100, making your total winnings $420. You get your money back plus your winnings. So at this point, Trump would be a heavy betting favorite at this point.
Right.
You would have to bet a lot of money to make even a small portion of it.
And it went up from, you had said something to something, maybe
it was
20 minutes
I've seen
ago.
it at 250. It was at 250, and then it just jumped up to 320. Now, and it'll change 1,000 more times,
right?
Because it's all just depending on where the money's coming in. But it's fascinating to watch.
Were you following that in 2016?
I was not, no. But I assume Hillary Clinton's line looked a whole lot like the Atlanta Falcons did in the Super Bowl.
If I recall correctly, in 2016, it was the Vegas betting line that was the harbinger of the Trump win.
Yeah.
That Vegas went
right.
in favor of Trump before basically anyone did.
Yeah.
I think we have our
Interesting.
our Texas correspondent is with us, and he was the seventh window, so I didn't see him down there off the bottom of the screen. But Sean, are you with us?
Yeah, hey guys, how are y'all?
All right. Well, tell us what's going to happen in Texas.
Well, Texas is going to go Trump, but I'm kind of interested in the whole Hispanic vote, and then divvying that out between like Starr County, as Resby was talking about, and then what's going on in Arizona. So because they're pinning Arizona's changes on the demographic changes, and allegedly that's part of that has to do with an unequitable effect of COVID on the Hispanic populations in Arizona. But you've had the same thing happen in Texas, and yet you're having a different reaction by the Hispanics in Texas on that, particularly in some place like Starr County. So I'm a little bit fascinated whether those things are true and why you would have a distinct change. I can tell you it's been pretty obvious in Texas with the Hispanics that they're not particularly woke. They don't particularly care for a lot of the chaos that's been going on with the rioting. I think a lot of these folks came up from border states in Mexico and are all too familiar with that sort of level of quote unquote liberty and lawlessness. And by and large, they're fairly family oriented. So as the Democrat message started to tie into the local Democrat message started to tie into the national Democrat message. And as it got more and more radical and more left, you alienated a lot of those guys in Texas, a lot of those Hispanics and illegals and illegals. That doesn't translate well for them. So that makes a lot of sense to me, what Resby's saying about Starr County, but Arizona is kind of perplexing. So I don't quite understand that flip.
I don't know. There wasn't a lot of unrest in Texas, but what do you envision societally if Trump wins?
There won't be any change. We'll keep carrying on like we are. We are a energy state. We're heavily invested in oil and natural gas. And there wasn't any way that we were going to go Biden. And in that little jab that Trump got in that last debate and got Biden to flub and say, yes, he was against fracking and yes, he would stop fracking. If he wasn't already buried in Texas, that buried him. We're a net exporter of energy to the world now in Texas. That's our economy. You can't touch that.
So, as you have looked around online, what's your take on North Carolina, Georgia, Ohio, Pennsylvania, these states that haven't been called but apparently are leaning Trump at the moment?
What's my take on it?
Yeah, I mean,
it looks like he's going to carry all of that. He's going to carry North Carolina just barely, but he's going to carry it. He was up almost 500,000 in Pennsylvania, but I'm sure Philadelphia hasn't reported yet. It looks like Trafalgar was right about Michigan. It looks like John James has actually got coattails for Trump in Michigan. It's leaning much heavier that way than they would suspect. Wisconsin's, had a difference of 20,000 votes, so who knows? The only surprise so far looks like be Arizona.
All right, so Arizona.
One thing to keep in mind. One thing to keep in mind too with Wisconsin is that Milwaukee tends to run really late with their vote count, so that could affect how the numbers look coming out of Wisconsin.
Yeah, apparently Arizona. Let's say you assume Arizona's flipped. He still has to. It's got them looking to see the split electoral votes in Maine and Nebraska to have Biden inch out a win. And of course, Nevada was kind of a wild card at one point. So it was depending on how badly the I don't know what county it is, but the county that Las Vegas is in is traditionally Democrat, but the lockdowns have so adversely affected everybody there. You were running a dead heat in Nevada. And so I don't know where that's going right now, but it was one of those that may flip the other way, may flip to Trump.
That would be Clark County.
Clark County, okay.
All right, Sean, do you have any questions for your old friend, Daryl? More big picture stuff, political, historical factors here.
No, if Michigan goes Trump, Michigan is one of the more odd states I think I've ever watched or followed politically. I don't know how you could elect all those school marms in Michigan and then go for Trump two election cycles in a row. I don't pretend to understand how you guys do there.
Well, I don't either. I've lived here 10 years, but I'm still new. So I don't have a clue.
But no, other than that, I don't. I need to read your book on Roman Catholicism. I need to grab it up and try to plow through that and see what I think.
See, that's one reason why I'm sort of secretly hoping for a Biden victory, because then that might keep the book fresh. Trump wins. Why would anybody need to read it then? But
all right, well, one of our listeners, Lance, has an interesting question, and this is sort of for everyone. What exactly holds this country together anymore? I mean, I might have said the NFL in previous years, but we barely have that. So
the two oceans. The United States is a sandwich, and the Pacific and Atlantic are the bread.
So what does hold the country together? Start with you, Sean, because you're never at a loss for words.
I have no idea. I have the good fortune of living in Texas, and we don't. We're sort of part of the union, and we're sort of not. Depends how we feel on a given day. We still have a secession bill that sits on the table, and varyingly people get serious about it and not serious about it, but it still floats out there. I don't know. It's weird to watch. I'm concerned that you've got a lot of this infestation of supermajority political expectations coming from California into Texas. I think that's why you're seeing the flip in Arizona. And you see Austin gets bigger all the time, and Austin's blue. Dallas proper is blue. Houston is blue, but it's a different reason for it. I don't know what the appeal is if you're fleeing California, and you are fleeing California because you've had supermajority rule for over 30 years now, or close right at 30 years. I mean, it depends how you consider Pete Wilson. But I don't understand that really. It's a disaster. You'd be broke in California except for the resurgence of the Silicon Valley and what they've been able to do. And you come to Texas trying to get away from that, and that's our biggest migration is from California. And you bring those politics with you, and I don't quite pretend to understand that. So,
well, it was funny. We were talking earlier about like you not understanding Michigan, and I've been in North Carolina almost 10 years now, and it's still such a bizarre state because it looks like Governor Cooper has won re-election, and yet Yvonne Hawley, the Democratic candidate for lieutenant governor, has just called and conceded the race to Republican Mark Robinson. So how in the world you get a Republican lieutenant governor and the same people filling in those ballots don't also put in the Republican candidate was Dan Forrest? I will never know. I thought 2016 was somewhat explainable. Pat McCrory lost to Roy Cooper, I think by virtue of a lot of people were upset about losing all the business from the North Carolina bathroom bill regarding which sexes may use which bathrooms. And so I could see it as to why it happened. But with this, if you're going to vote, I don't understand why you would only go if you're going to vote for Mark Robinson. Why not also vote for Dan Forrest? Especially since it seems like people are also voting for Tom Tillis. I just read that he is currently leading by more at this point than he was in 2014, and he was an underdog in 2014 to unseat Kay Hagan. Rest in peace. She has since died in the past few years. But I mean, Tillis is he's got more legs than I thought. With regards to this, it will be fascinating. Decision Desk just called Ohio for Trump.
Yeah, that makes sense. It's kind of a weird deal because even in Texas had a pretty good spattering of Democrat voters, but those were old line yellow dog Democrats. Those were Sam Nunn. Ann Richards was considered a little radical, but this new type of Democrat, this Pelosi or even worse AOC type of Democrat, you wouldn't think that would have any traction in Texas. I don't know anybody who goes that way, but they obviously got some. They've got some pull. It's just not with any generation which I understand or grew up with. It's got to be Zoomers and you get a little bit of your Latinx here, but not a lot.
Well, so is the real divide city versus rural, with the suburbs in the middle as the swing vote, and so we might say that people like Tim Keller and other evangelicals who have moved to the political middle and to try to make themselves more palatable to city dwellers, and certainly there are demographic reasons, at least there were pre-COVID, to think that was inexorably the way it was going to go. I'd like to hear Daryl's opinion on whether this is really not maybe a coastal thing, but a city versus rural and suburban thing.
Well, I was going to say that I do think one thing that binds the country together, seemingly, and I don't think it's the healthiest for the country, is the military and war and America's hegemony. Although, Chortles, your question about cities would suggest I don't think there's strong support for the military necessarily in cities. But I think in the suburbs and in the heartland, and even places like the University of Michigan, which I still find it baffling, but I go to Ann Arbor for at least a couple of athletic events when there's not a virus a year. And I've been to the Big House for a football game. And at halftime, they bring out a veteran of a foreign war and everybody stands up and celebrates. And this, University of Michigan is the home to the Students for a Democratic Society, major protests against the Vietnam War, etc. And yet even there, you have this outpouring of support for the military, which says something about the military, says something about America's presence in the world and what we've been able to accomplish as a global power, et cetera, et cetera. But I don't think in the cities or in city churches, you would necessarily find that kind of support for the military. So again, those cities and military may be an indications in some ways of where the country is. I guess too, you could throw in there trucks, pickup trucks. And I don't think you see a lot of pickup trucks.
Ford or Chevy.
Does it matter?
Oh yeah, it matters a lot around here.
Right, but in the city, it wouldn't matter at all.
Right. Oh, you're right.
So what your ride is, and what war we're fighting, or whether you have relatives in the military, might say something about it.
You know, that's an interesting observation. Just even on vehicles, when you had the Biden bus rolling through New Braunfels, and the Super Duties and Dualies rolled out with their Trump train and escorted them into Austin. And somebody made a comment that, well, that would have been time better spent, manning phone banks for the GOP and stuff like that. And I said, take a look at those trucks. Those are lifted Super Duties and Dualies. None of those guys spend any time behind a desk answering a phone. It's not who they are. It's not what they do. And so it's a different dynamic of work and engagement. You really do, at least in Texas, you really do still see this blue collar split between urban yuppie types and the guys working in the oil fields or working on the ranches or working in construction and the trades, which is why, and that's really where a lot of your Hispanic laborers are in Texas. They're working in oil camps. They're working on construction sites. They're not your new type of blue Democrats. It's not their character. It's not their ethic at all.
All right, well, here's something disturbing from one of our viewers. It says Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania won't be decided tonight, per officials in those states. So it's going to look to some people tonight because of the majority Western and Northeastern states that have heavy, clear Democratic majorities. We're probably going to wake up in the morning with Biden having more provisional electoral votes, and all the contested being things that might be delayed. So that looks like a recipe for fun, if that's so, and I don't doubt it. Let me check in with. I don't think Fox has updated much.
I'm interested. I mean, again, in the North Carolina call, because it looks like the last county that they were waiting for seems to be in, or at least on the decision desk HQ site, which was Granville County, which is showing Trump by about 2,100 votes margin. And that kind of tails on down again. It's so weird because it looks like Tom Tillis is going to eke this thing out, yet Governor Cooper will still be the governor. But who knows? I think that'll be one of the next states to be called.
Let's see. Phil, unmute your mic if you can. I had a question for you.
Yes, sir.
So, what holds the country together? Now, you're coming at this from an admittedly skeptical position as an RPCNA pastor, covenanter, but what do you have in common with your city neighbors?
Boy, I don't know. If you'd look at a county breakdown of red and blue here in Ohio, you have blue counties around Cincinnati, Columbus, Cleveland. It's the cities, and most of the rest of the state is red. I know, we're in a county of only about 40,000 people. Our big city, our county seats about 14,000, and we're pretty heavily Republican here. And I think the remark about the pickup trucks was a good observation. Although you folks forgot about Ram Dodge, that sort of thing. I'm part of a Mopar family, so. Yeah, I don't know what to say holds the country together. It's a mystery to me. There's no common faith. There's no common, you might say an Americanism much anymore. no one knows what that is. So I couldn't tell you, Chortles, exactly what does, except maybe force a habit. I don't know.
You know, it brings. Sorry, Schwartz. It brings to mind. You know, I think was it Weinstein who said it right. We all saw these pictures of what was going on at Evergreen State, and just wouldn't imagine that would spill out into a national political movement, but it has. And so it's I think it's that bizarre to half the country going, this is. I said it before on Twitter, and I really and when I started saying it 4 or 5 years ago, it was sort of jokingly, but it's sort of true, and now it's really true. We live in really stupid times. I mean, that's my perspective on it, and I've gone to college, and I've been liberal sort of in my thought process, and where the country is politically, at least with the Democrats, is not something I ever imagined, and to me is just laughable. It's silly. And yet a lot of people really take it seriously, and I'm befuddled by it.
Yeah, it's people who never got over what they learned in college. Most of us did, it seems.
But it's so vacuous. I mean, and there's just nothing there. It wasn't like, a liberal arts major, coming out in the 70s or the 80s or even the early 90s. This takeover of gender studies and social sciences and the lack of profundity that is there. And there's just nothing there. It's you just go, well, I don't know how to unite with you in those causes or find common ground with you or commonality. Now, I think it's silly. I just think, I don't even know what to mean when you start talking to me about men having periods and transgender rights. And it was the whole deal. How did Bruce Jenner converting to Caitlyn not remain a joke? I don't. And in what world does that become mainstream? I mean, I get that there's some people, and you always have some people on the margins, and you've always got a little bit quote unquote of freak shows going on, but having that group take on such a dominant role within you only have two national parties, and they take on the dominant role in one of them, and I'm supposed to politically find a common ground with that, whether it's the Green New Deal or transgender rights, or it's like asking me to kill myself, or commit suicide, or it's strange. I don't see a common ground there, other than you hope they grow out of it, and you hope whatever momentum they've gotten out of their national prominence gets crushed. You hope that Trump wins and they grow tired of it and they move on to something else, but it's bizarre.
Well, Daryl, a thing that people often forget about you is that you're a ruling elder in a church. How would you or your session or you and your pastor counsel someone who's just extremely agitated and worried about all these political things and the climate that we find ourselves in? I mean, maybe you have or haven't had that problem, but you've thought about it. You've thought about how to give counsel to those who are beside themselves in 2020. Any thoughts on that?
Well, I think I need a little more data and you can't supply it because it's a hypothetical. But I would want to know more about a person's position in life, where they are, what their age is, what their job is or education is, family life is, what their participation in church life is. But my sense in following the reactions to the virus, it does correlate a lot with how people think about Trump. It seems to me, and I've had conversations with people close to me about how to view Trump, despite his more than warts. I mean, his real blemishes, scars, wounds, and the like. And it's a hard sell. And if that's where someone's coming from, I'm not sure how to do that, because Christianity does set up in a way that it makes it easier to judge someone like Trump as an inferior person when it comes to morality and sanctification. And sure, I can play the 2K card and try to say, well, separate that from the way you think about how Christians should behave, but it doesn't still get to something that's almost existential with the way people relate to Trump. And it almost seems more existential for people who are opposed to Trump than for people who support him. I mean, I know there are people who, say great things about Trump and go on and on and on, and the rallies. And I'm sure there are people who are pro-Trump in that way and overestimate his skills, his abilities, etc. But for them, I still don't think it's as visceral as the people who oppose Trump. So I guess that's if that's where someone who's troubled by all this is coming from, I don't know what to do about that.
Well, the love for Trump is real too, and my office is next to a thrift store, and I think probably several times I've seen a vehicle pull up that has a Trump flag, or the owner of the vehicle has gone to the trouble of having a decal made, and there are local shops that can cut very intricate type and that sort of thing. And it's not that expensive, but, paragraph long peons to Trump and the importance thereof. I tweeted at least one of those. I can think of at least two of those, and that's one little shopping center.
Well, do we want to throw the unpinned hand grenade into the barrel of gasoline? And talking about Arizona, I was at Josh Crash Hour at Hotline Josh. Look, Trump may end up losing this election because of his irrational grudge against John McCain. Would be quite a dramatic flourish, which would be very much possible. So,
well, I mean, there is some irrationality, but we have to ask ourselves why a certain kind of blue collar, maybe even people on benefits, white Southerners, and I don't think racism explains it. There's something of these people have been forgotten, and nobody has spoken to them or acknowledged them, and somehow he's done that, which is bizarre.
Yeah, I mean,
he's from Queens or the Bronx or wherever he's from.
It will never not be fascinating to me that the same people who say, well, I didn't surrender at Appomattox, General Lee did, will then go and vote wholeheartedly for Donald Trump wearing a MAGA hat. I mean, that is the most fascinating thing about this election is how after absolutely hating someone being elected as a Democrat out of Chicago, they effectively elected a Democrat out of New York up until that point, and have now fallen head over heels with the man. I mean, no digs. I mean, no disrespect. Just absolutely fascinating, the situation we find ourselves in.
Yeah.
I mean, is the nearest parallel, Daryl? Is it Andrew Jackson, or is it someone else?
To Trump.
Yeah.
I guess that's right. I mean, I'm not the presidential historian that I should be, or the historian of presidential elections.
You don't have to know everything. You just have to know more than we do.
I mean, in my lifetime, you know,
I mean, Nixon spoke to people like that
right,
in a way, didn't
right.
he?
I was thinking of Nixon. I mean, he's much more.
Peace be upon him, our greatest president.
He's a career politician and actually a pretty able politician, whether or not you agree with his policies. And he had that little problem at the end of his career, but
yeah, he was framed.
Which seems like nothing compared to what we've been dealing with, but okay.
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, Reagan, I guess, had a kind of common touch too. And, you
consider would be William Jennings Bryan. I mean, he did have that sort of populist appeal in the way that Trump does.
Right. But I mean, Trump is a brassy guy. I mean, he's an outer borough kind of guy. Morton Downey, if anyone remembers that television talk show host, he was also an outer borough New Yorker, and I, as somebody from Philadelphia, should really dislike Trump, and I don't particularly like him, but the Philadelphians generally despise New Yorkers. But in the current climate, if I have to compare him to mainstream media outlets, professors at universities, the list goes on. I mean, Trump seems much more commonsensical in a way. I know that would upset some people close to me if I hearing that, but it's just the case.
Well, it's certainly the case with Trump that people don't feel like he's condescending to talk to them. He's not coming at them from a Harvard-educated background or a Yale-educated background and trying to explain political science to them, or even daring to posture as a policy wonk. So there's a relating that's done there. You know, you listen to somebody like Jason Whitlock, and they'll argue that African-American men relate really well to Trump. And so it's yet another interesting tie-in that you wouldn't necessarily see coming.
Right.
Well, it seems like the media, even though they don't like him, should be more fascinated with him than they are.
Right.
And not just
and they were until he got the nomination.
Right.
I mean,
yeah. Be careful what you wish for. Yeah.
I mean, and I think Biden in its better form may have been able to resonate with common people. I mean, I'm not buying entirely his Scranton roots because he hasn't lived there like forever. And you look at the way his children have gone, and I'm not simply talking about brushes with the law and more than that. I've thought about what happens to politicians, especially in the Senate. You become part of an elite set in the legislature, and your children then go to much better schools than you did, which is what true of Hunter. I can't remember where he went, but I think he went to Ivy League or maybe Georgetown undergrad and then an Ivy law school or vice versa. And that wasn't Joe's experience. And of course, being the son of a senator probably gets you access to some elite institutions. But I don't think Joe has necessarily kept touch with his people in Scranton. And in Wilmington, I don't think he's surrounded himself with those kinds of people, but I still think he probably has it there somewhere inside him because of his family background. But I think he's just a diminished person at this point, and he's got to deal with a whole set of allies or a coalition in the Democratic Party that, whether it's Hillary calling people in Middle America deplorables, or whatever the Gang of Four thinks of those people as racists and bigots, etc. It's not it's not going to give Joe much room to relate to those folks, or to me.
Yeah, it's very fascinating. I don't know. I guess you've had people like J.D. Vance write on the Appalachians and the rednecks and that sort of thing, but there's not a lot of scholarly work on that. Hutch, that's sort of your field. How do you view the rural? I mean, you'd like to plant a rural church. How do you view the? I mean, is there such a chasm between rural and city culture? I mean, can it be bridged at all?
That's a great question. And my honest answer is that I don't know. There is the phenomenon that I think you have to confront of people that are moving to the city from the country because they want to leave the sort of the outsider's view of, where they live as being backwards and retrograde and that sort of thing. And so obviously those are the folks that are moving into the city. And, once they get there, they tend to vote more like a progressive. By the same token, you have, people that move into the city that are like me, that have never really gotten away from the rural roots. And so if there were more that were in my bracket that were kind of comfortable back and forth between the two, then I would say, yeah, there might be people out there who could bridge that gap and kind of act as a translator between these two groups. But honestly, I don't know how many there are. So one of the things that I think is desperately needed, especially for the folks that are in our coastal cities that we think of as sort of being elite zones, is we almost need to pass a law that says they have to go live in like rural Oklahoma for 6 months, out of the year, 3 years in a row or something. And kind of get it through their heads. This is not New York City. And so I think that divide is not insuperable, but I think that it's growing, and I'm worried that we're going to get to a place where that divide is going to run deep enough that we could be looking at a significant conflict in the United States. That really disturbs me.
George, one of the places, to pick up what Hutch is talking about, one of the places where we saw this, and you and I talked about it, is you saw this show up a couple of years ago in the PCA in the Race and Reconciliation study. And I remember going to our presbytery, which is South Texas Presbytery, and the room split. And this seems, it's not an exaggeration. The room literally split. And you had one group in their bootcut jeans and Magellan shirts. And you had the other group that was primarily out of Austin in their hipster clothes. And they split right along those lines on that issue. And so, I'm no longer in the South Texas Presbytery, so I don't know where it's gone to. And I know that they continue to tolerate each other. But quite frankly, after that meeting, it was really just tolerating each other. They did not see the world the same. They often did not have the same outlook as far as quote unquote, applying the gospel or reaching the city. They'd already established churches that were divided along these lines, along Redeemer franchise and for the city churches and other churches who were not established or planted that way. And I haven't seen, I haven't been in the PCA now for about a year, but it wasn't on the verge of coming back or reconciling at the time.
Yeah, I mean, the primary emphasis for most churches, as far as church planting goes, is city churches. or even rural churches on that. I'm sorry, suburban churches on that sort of city redeemer pattern. It's but I think with COVID, you have to wonder what it's going to do for all the people that are fleeing the big cities, especially New York. What a huge change they're going to have, and property values and everything else. It may be cheaper to plant a church in New York in a year, but there may not be any people there for you to plant for. So it is it's quite a thing, and you wonder if the PCA ever divided, if it wouldn't be largely city churches on one side and suburban churches on the other, and we know there aren't that many rural churches anyway, truly rural churches. So there may be a reset in a lot of ways, and church planning and philosophies of ministry may be one of those areas that's reset and recalibrated.
And it's not just rural. Let's make sure that we're clear about that. We're talking also about like small town churches. And a lot of times it's those small town churches, even more than the rural areas, that get overlooked. So, in talking with folks about this over the last, 8 months or so, one of the things that's interesting to me that's kind of appeared again and again in those conversations is like, if I talk to folks in, X, Y, or Z denomination, they're really concerned about people in the rural areas, which then led kind of a follow-up question on my part. And go, okay, well, what about the small towns? And everybody that I've talked to has just kind of stared back blankly at me. And so I think that the issue is bigger than just rural versus city. I think you've got to take these small towns into account. And it's shocking to me that some of them are overlooked. So I've been talking with folks, in the last, since I appeared on the last Presbycast that we did together about rural church planning, I'm hearing from folks in various places in Tennessee. And one gentleman that reached out to me was in McMinnville. And the more that I looked at McMinnville, the more interesting that town looks because of its proximity to some other places. So you've got a whole bunch of the faculty from Middle Tennessee State University that live in McMinnville because they don't want to live in Murfreesboro. And so once you start adding some of those dynamics in that people often don't think about, now little towns like McMinnville become more important. And those are the places that we really seem to be overlooking, especially if you're a Redeemer transformationalist guy, right? So why wouldn't you want to go to a small town and plant a church where half of the faculty for a major state university lives? And it seems that that's something that's just not on our radar.
Well, there are going to be some demographic shifts in the next decade, and we still don't know the long-term effect of COVID, but that's going to be part of it. It just has to be. Daryl, so how many people in Hillsdale?
8,000 roughly.
Oh, that's pretty small.
Yeah.
That's different. Certainly different from anywhere you've ever lived before.
Sure. Yeah.
Fox is just called Texas for Donnie from Queens.
Or that'll bring the numbers much closer together. So I think it's clear that Trump may be won a few of the states that they said he would have to win, but there's still enough in dispute generally that I don't know if anybody goes to bed tonight knowing who the next president will be.
We're not going to bed. We're staying up until this thing is official, baby.
I got a
Well-
question for Daryl. I got a political question for Daryl.
Okay, and then I'm going to have to go because I got to get to bed.
If I can be up, you can be up. Hold on.
Yeah, well, it's an hour. It's an hour later here.
I work too. Hold on. So, we all know who've been alive for longer than a few years that Chicago has notoriously rigged elections and, driven a fraudulent train. But I didn't realize that Pennsylvania had this reputation until this go around. And you go through all the pollsters and even somebody like Trafalgar, and they go, yeah, he's got a 2-point lead in Pennsylvania, but unless you've got a 4 or 5 point lead in Pennsylvania, you're likely to have that stolen from you. So talk to us about this, the voter fraud that is prominent in Pennsylvania, and where is it at?
Well, it's likely not that I know that much about it. I mean, for whatever reason, maybe it was background noise in my growing up there and following elections, but I assume it's got to be in Philadelphia. And urban machine politics are such that I don't know how you do it. I haven't seen a good movie on this.
I hadn't either. I didn't know about Philly, so that's why I was asking.
Yeah, I mean, Philadelphia city. I mean, there's so little check on the Democratic Party there. But again, I don't know what the actual mechanics of it are. And I don't mean to simply cast aspersions on the city or the government as if this doesn't happen. But even following the news the last 6 weeks, there was a break-in of polling. A facility that was holding the polling electronic booths or whatever before they were going out to the polls. Someone broke into that. Security was light there. There have been other stories about people sending out too many ballots and whatnot. So, Republicans may try to do the same thing, but Republicans just don't have the same kind of presence in the city of Philadelphia. And I'm not sure what Pittsburgh is like either, but it's probably more Philadelphia.
Yeah, I'd heard it was more Philly, so I just wasn't familiar with it. So yeah.
Well, I'm going to say goodnight, folks.
Well, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me,
Daryl.
Yeah,
fielding dumb questions and questions that were beyond your ken.
there's an old Hungarian toast that I learned from Bob Godfrey, which is confusion to our enemy. So whoever our enemy is, may they have confusion. But,
I was going to say, before you go, I was going to say Amanda Knox just tweeted out, whatever happens, the next 4 years can't be as bad as that 4-year study abroad I did in Italy, right?
Okay, I got a clip for you, Daryl.
A man got to have a code.
There you go.
A man must have a code.
Is that a cold or a code?
Well, it depends on whether you wash your hands frequently this winter.
Yeah, that's true.
All right, well good night, Dr. Daryl.
All right.
And,
good to see you, folks.
We'll see you again. All right, now he's out.
So with Texas now being called, and it's now on Decision Desk HQ as well, it is Biden 210, Trump 204.
Is it 210 or 223? I'm seeing 223.
No, we're looking at Fox. Let me switch back.
Okay.
Switch back to.
There we go.
Oh.
So it looks like it pretty much comes down to Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania. That's going to tell the tale. Of course.
Yeah.
I
So
guess
Trump really may have screwed himself by messing with McCain, huh? That'd be something else.
That is it would be an interesting night in the Dominich household.
I didn't see that predicted by any of the pollsters, so that's pretty good.
Yeah. Well, Ben Dominic is married to Meghan McCain. So I do wonder if there was a house divided on that vote. I didn't effort anything into it, but it would be interesting to know.
Yeah.
Yeah, that would be interesting.
So we're not going to know Pennsylvania, Michigan, or Wisconsin tonight, right?
It doesn't look like it.
Well, it's the percentage. Well, yeah, under maybe 60%. Hang on, I just made that go away.
Well, we does look Nevada. Like where's Nevada at?
It does look like the GOP will hold the Senate.
That's good.
With
Resby,
Joni Ernst.
Resby, do you have any idea what caused that jump in the odds on Trump?
Hold on. They just. So the odds have now been pulled, which there can be any number of reasons why that might happen, but essentially there's no longer a line being offered. I think early on, just because of everyone wanting to get in on the gravy train, Trump train, call it what you will, those odds jump to try to, if I throw 3 units of money at this and I make 1 back, and for a total of 4, it's still a pretty good night.
Yeah.
But then you get the sort of the underdog value at the time in Biden. So, I mean, there's somebody out there who had like Biden plus 235 who could make a lot of money off of this election in that case. So, but it's just fascinating just from like a money standpoint of just where do people, if you really vote with your wallet, this is the true voting with your wallet.
Right.
But I think the last I saw it was Trump 135, Biden plus 120, which is not as uneven as it sounds. That's still from a numbers standpoint and betting, that's a really good value on Joe Biden.
Well, it's been really nice having a degenerate gambler as a co-host, because
responsible degenerate
I don't know what any of these numbers mean.
Where is Joe Pesci when we need him?
Yeah.
We need Joe Pesci in the background yelling at Resby.
As all the greats say, you bet the numbers, not the team.
He's probably working.
Right.
He's working for the Democratic Party, trying to challenge some results somewhere, most likely. Joe Pesci.
Probably.
Does anybody got any Nevada updates? Do we know where they're at? I'm floating around. I don't see anything.
When I click on there are no results yet. Maybe they have a late poll time. There's nothing there.
Okay.
No totals.
And in some of this, it can just be some of it can just be a matter of when some of these counties make their results available. With sort of the up and coming of Decision Desk, as they were kind of giving a lot of transparency to these processes that people don't really know about. Sometimes it is literally calling a person at the Board of Elections to get the number.
Well, it looks like a blowout for Biden with 50% of the votes in. If you'll look at the detail there, wrong one.
Where are you talking about?
No, they've changed it. No, I was on the I clicked on the other state. I clicked on California. That was not good. Okay.
See, Nevada is where Californians go when they're transitioning to Arizona.
Is Arizona where they go when they're transitioning to Texas?
Sometimes. Although I think I made a joke with somebody with political math on Twitter just a few moments ago. Idaho and Texas and Arizona are going to have some real reckonings with people fleeing blue states into their states.
Oh yeah.
And then voting the exact same way they did in the blue state.
Yeah.
So that in 15 years, they've got the same problems.
Yeah,
and we get it in North Carolina too. So
yeah, I'm a little pissed off right now. So yeah, definitely.
Yeah, that's one of the things that I continue to find interesting is watching the sort of insanity of reproducing these systems that you're trying to flee in the next place you go. So I guess it just goes to show that my grandfather was dead on when he told me once that if common sense were so common, more people would have it. So, it's like, okay, well, we voted for all these policies and they didn't work in California. Why are they going to work in Texas?
Yeah, you wonder if it's like some strange political version of Stockholm syndrome or what in the world it is.
That's a great question.
Okay, so our friend in Northern Ireland is he's wimped out and checked out. It's 5:06 a.m. there. It's pretty
Well, it's going
bizarre.
to be 5:06 a.m. here sooner than later, so I don't understand.
Well,
they're all locked down anyways.
This is like Daryl's excuse. Yeah, we're all tired. Suck it up.
I don't have to be at work until 8:30, and I don't have to walk the dog until 6:30. So I'm golden. It's all good. Sean, is it bizarre to you that someone in Northern Ireland cares about our election?
Not if they've got money on it, but I mean, if they're in COVID lockdowns too, what else are we going to be doing? So, and I don't know if they are or not. But there's quite the strong tie between Ireland and America, so it's not all that odd, I guess.
A lot of Polish people move into Ireland.
It's worth mentioning how.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry. It is no. It is worth mentioning though how important the U.S. presidential election is worldwide, and so on some level, yes, it does make sense that particularly in English-speaking countries, we have intense interest in an American election. Even more so, you'd think in the British Isles. Especially given all the stuff that's gone over there with Brexit and a surging populist movement there, it does make sense that there is that kind of attention.
Well, populist at the time.
Sure. Well,
that's true.
Particularly with Ireland, for years, you had relatives, spread between both countries.
I still do. I've got an uncle
between Ireland and America. I mean, that's fairly common. So.
Yeah, indeed.
Well, Oregon becomes the first United States state to decriminalize possession of all drugs, including cocaine, heroin, meth for personal use. Congratulations, libertarians. You freaking did it.
And in fairness to them, I do want to say, guys, if you get the chance, you should read a book called Chasing the Scream by Johann Hari. He talks about some of the interesting changes in Switzerland, where it came to some of what they decriminalized there, including heroin, and it has worked shockingly well. Their heroin crisis is effectively over. But of course, those are also states with massively subsidized healthcare systems. So who knows what that could look like here?
And they get a lot of crossing.
I
was going to say they get a lot of crossing of the river from Denmark too, of people coming over and then heading on back.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you look at our opioid crisis, and you struggle to have that kind of optimism about that stuff. So,
yeah, I know this is off topic at the election, but their model for how they did it was very interesting. Was that they said, okay, well, if we let's say we legalize everything, then all of the money that we've been pouring into the drug war for all of these years, we can now pour into, ways to assist these individuals to, stay as functioning members of society. And there's some other numbers pieces in there about the number of people that are actually addicted versus the number of people that use, and about how our theories and models of addictions work. But one of the things that's come out of that is that in Switzerland, you go to your local heroin clinic, one of which is right across the street from the previous president's house, and you get your dose, but you have to be there at like 6 a.m. in the morning because, they're Swiss. And then, if you were out of work, they had worked with other, employers to say, okay, look, if you hire this guy and help him get back on his feet, we're going to subsidize 1/3 of his salary for 3 years.
My gosh.
So those models have been wildly successful there. So it's interesting to think about all of the possibilities that could exist in that way. So
Gosh, I don't want to think about my tax dollars going to subsidize somebody's pay for a third of the year while they work through their drug dependency. My goodness.
Here's one of the things that's intriguing, though. It's my understanding, and I have to dig deeper on this to see if I could find it. There was a report, particularly about the program in Switzerland, where I guess they started that program 8 years or so ago. And 8 years later, of the people that have originally started going there and using the government-run clinics, only one of them is still going to the heroin clinic for any dose of heroin.
Wow.
All of the original folks that they saw in that first year, now 8 years later, they're all reputable, hardworking members of society who have made a remarkable recovery from addiction. And so once again, like I said, it seems crazy to think that, this is something that they're doing, but it's working. And that's surprising to me.
I'm shocked. I mean, I have to see their rehab program. I've dealt with enough tweakers in apartments to struggle believing you have a lot of success with that. But maybe they've got a great rehab protocol and program that we're not utilizing or unfamiliar with.
And that is, I think, one of to take this kind of turn this back towards the election. I think that is one of the interesting things that we see as well with this rural urban divide that I have a hard time processing. Is if you look at these rural areas that are dealing with the opioid epidemic and that have been so beat down by this particular opioid epidemic, and you can connect that opioid epidemic straight to hopelessness. And so, but these are the people that are voting for Donnie from Queens.
Yeah.
And on a at least prima facie basis, that seems very odd, because that's a community where you would think you would see Democrats doing particularly well, and they're not at all.
Well, I got a lot of customers that are on benefits or disability, that sort of thing. And they're not terribly happy with the level of service they receive from the local, state, and federal governments. They're happy to take it, but I don't think they have any illusions about government. I think it's easier to have illusions about the quality and benevolence of government if you're a suburbanite than if you're probably at the high or the low end of the scale. The tycoons and the millionaires, they know the government's incompetent and takes a lot of their money. If they don't collude with them to punish their competitors, as some do. But I think it's those of us in the middle who probably have delusions of the government's grandeur and efficiency.
I get your point, but I don't have any delusions about it. I've had to work with them most of my adult life.
You're on the high end, though.
Okay.
You're a burgeoning tycoon, as it were.
Allow me to say, as a former member of the United States Army, that I can second anyone's experience of the government as pointing to inordinate insufficiency.
See, and I'm just basking in the validation of my opinions on government architecture.
So what are your opinions on government architecture there, Resby?
No, don't ask.
Well,
no.
Unfortunately, I don't think I can crack my knuckles loud enough into the microphone to have them pick up. But it's my opinion that the one good thing that came out of the Soviet Union was brutalist architecture, because it inspires a disdain and distrust of all levels of government.
Yes.
And it is the embodiment of the fact that, these are positions which we should make fun of people for desiring, rather than elevating them to these high positions in our life, such that we would dress our infant children up as recently deceased Supreme Court justices.
It's funny that you say that, because being in Estonia and Latvia with our mutual friend, their chortles, one of the most interesting things to see was to be in these gorgeous cities that have been there for 1,200 years, or in some cases less, with this beautiful architecture, and right next to it would be a Soviet era building, and it was jarring to see the difference in what these two, might we say, ideologies produced.
Well,
yeah, I mean, it's, or what was the other joke about exit polls earlier in Soviet Russia? Polls exit you. Which I am morally bound to tell any joke which shows the Polish people in a good light. So we've had enough of the others, and it's time to start fighting back.
Fair enough.
So have they called North Carolina and Georgia yet, or are they just leaving it?
Nothing. The New York Times needle is apparently leaning Biden in Georgia.
Get out
North
of here.
Carolina is just hanging, on to, with greater than 99% in, Donald Trump has a 50.09% lead in the votes.
Wow. So he's hanging on to North Carolina by a thread.
Well, he's got roughly a 1.5% over Joe Biden. So it comes to, it's 80,000 votes.
Oh, it's 80,000. Well, it was 43 when I came on the broadcast. So
now, Georgia sure seems like, I guess it all just depends on, whatever county Atlanta is in. If they're hanging on, if they're hanging on to something, that would be a little weird.
There was an issue at one of the polling places in Fulton County where apparently a pipe burst or something, and so they got started late, and so then they had to close the polls late because they started late, and that is a highly populous area, and so it makes sense that they're going to be behind there.
Well, let's, as we said, we'd go 3 hours. I don't think we'll go quite 3 hours. We've lost about a third of our audience
fair enough
in the last 30 minutes. But what are the prospects if Biden wins? Of course, I did some time capsule episode, which some people enjoyed and some people hated. My wife wasn't crazy about it. But it was, it was sort of a worst case scenario for lockdown and repression if Biden wins and Harris quickly takes over, and she's sort of an authoritarian leftist. But what are we seriously looking at if Biden does win sometime in the next 2 weeks?
I think one thing we're looking at is a hard push on the Second Amendment. I think that a Biden-Harris administration would immediately move for an executive order of some sort, banning AR-15s entirely and banning the 30-round magazines that go with them. I think another area where we could expect a push is that Joe Biden has said explicitly in the last month or so, I believe, that if he wins the election, he intends to see the Equality Act passed in the first 100 days. And one of the things that the Equality Act does is intentionally gut the language of the Religious Freedom bill that they passed, in 1990? I don't know, maybe in 2000 something.
Well, he can't do that he can't do that without the Senate. It looks like the Senate is safe enough.
Well, but those are the things to concern about that could be real pressures, because obviously we have an election in 2 years. And so that could change to a Democrat majority Senate in basically no time. So
we know that historically there's usually a backlash after 2 years. And
at this point, given what we've seen in the last 4 years, I wouldn't bank on anything.
Yeah. No, it's
Chortles, would you hit refresh on that Fox News map? I am
Uh,
interested to see what color Arizona will be upon you doing so.
I think I just did. Let's see.
Resby, did I hear something of them
That's
saying that there
blue.
were something like 1 million votes still outstanding in Arizona?
Hard to say. I'm seeing people say Fox News has retracted its call on Arizona, but
Interesting.
yeah.
Interesting.
So, Sean,
So-
what do you think? I mean,
Well, they'll be
you
if
live in
Biden
a
wins.
city where you're dealing with progressives on a daily basis. So,
Right.
tell us what we've got to look forward to.
If Biden wins, you'll see a huge sell-off in the stock market. Probably anywhere between 1,500 and 2,000 point drop. He has hinted at, and the people he's talking to on the virus side are strongly recommending an 8-week lockdown. And then I expect them, even though he's hemmed and hawed on it and said, not really, they are going to put a moratorium on any leases to fracking on federal lands. They will immediately, I assume within his first year, be pushing for tax increases. And they will, in some form or fashion, immediately give an attempt to two things. One, some version of a Green New Deal and some version of a Medicare for all. All of those things going down. The last time we saw an economy like that would probably be Jimmy Carter or something close to it.
Yeah.
Except now we're strangled with a debt load that by the end of the year will be greater than your GDP. And
Goodness.
I don't know how you uncouple yourself from that.
Yeah, I have no idea how you don't.
I have no idea how you do that. I mean, it's an economic disaster.
Yeah, I'm not a financial guy, but that sounds negative.
Yeah. Yeah, to say the least.
Well, again, as we move towards the finish line on this episode, and again, it's a live show for our friends. It may or may not make a serviceable podcast, but some people will listen anyway. How do we act after this election? If Trump wins, I mean, one of the things people who like Trump like about him is his enemies. They think he's got great enemies, as typified. Let me go ahead and play it. I took the trouble to harvest it. I think we all remember this lady.
Donald J. Trump is now president of the United States. President Obama steps away for the inaugural great honor to be able to introduce for the first time ever anywhere the 45th president of the United States of America, Donald.
My favorite part of that moment was that she looked up at the camera first.
To my world, I am so sorry to my world. This is not what we want.
We will face
There's so much potential
but we will get the job done.
for beauty and for devastation. In this one moment, it's just almost incomprehensible that they can exist right now. So,
and we are grateful
so
to
close.
President Obama.
So close. So that's our poster girl. That's the cover art for the broadcast. And well, I think I actually have we got a clip here. There we go. That's her, the screaming anti-Trump lady. Oh, wrong one.
Well, if we want to close on a bit of, I guess, good news, if you don't like President or Wow, Freudian slip. Bit of good news if you don't like Joe Biden too much. Monroe County, Pennsylvania, 2016, Hillary Clinton 48%, Trump 48%. 2020, Biden 37%, Trump 62%. A
There you go.
14-point flip.
Obviously,
There you
the Trump supporters, killed a bunch of people. That's all. That's the only way that could have happened.
And according to noticeably not here Nate Pascal,
A
he
numbers
says
guy.
that,
We needed him. We needed him.
yeah, would have been helpful to have the voluntary numbers guy. That he seems to be tinfoiling in his hat that Fox News is, for whatever reason, not wanting you to see the counties Trump has flipped in Michigan. So he said, holy smokes, the guy doing map analysis just got overridden and they went to commercial break.
Well, here, I've got a clip of a Fox News family who are very optimistic. See? Tell me that's not
I still hate that I didn't get one of those.
Yeah, the modern day druid outfit, the Snuggie. I guarantee we have at least one listener who has a Snuggie. I don't know which one.
And if they're wearing a Snuggie right now, they're heathens.
If you own a Snuggie, send Presbycast a picture of you wearing your Snuggie and we will retweet it.
And I reserve the right to mock it relentlessly.
Well, I think we'll go ahead and wrap up, but we don't know who's going to win, and I don't think we thought we would know. I think we're closer to knowing than I thought we would be.
Looks like Minnesota just got called for Biden.
Yeah, I think that's not surprising.
Did
So make him
Hillary win Minnesota in 2016?
She did.
Yeah, it's not even terribly. But well, this will be the longest Presbycast, maybe. That's.
I don't know. I feel like there's a couple call-ins that really gave this a run.
Seemed like that, yeah.
Okay, I got a quick question though. I'm seeing on y'all's map here Nevada colored in red. Is there any news on Nevada?
That means that Donald Trump is currently leading, but there's only 3 precincts in.
3%
or 3% in.
Yeah. So that's insignificant. I think we all hope that there are no, this isn't settled in court, that it's pretty obvious who the victor was. That's best, no matter who it is.
Sure.
I think we're all for that. So, Hutch, thanks for joining us. Of course, Sean, always happy.
Night, guys.
Thanks
It was a pleasure.
to Daryl for joining us for so long. We know that his warm milk was waiting, and he had to get off to Dreamland. We understand that, and we're glad that Resby's power stayed on all the way. Our friend Forfair Davis joined us. He's quite the Politico, but he had some bandwidth issues. And again, that's obviously the state of California. Governor Newsom trying to censor Presbycast. But thanks to those, we've had a pretty consistent number who have stuck with us live. We jump back to the comments and see if we have any thing we need to address. No, we had some good ideas from the live stream viewers, some good content, and well, a good podcast relies on its listeners for content, and I don't know if we're good, but we do that. So, Resby, I guess it's time to tell people good night, and I'll try to find some music for us to hear on the way out.
All right. Well, thanks everyone for listening. If you are, for whatever reason, listening to this as a regular podcast, thanks. But I feel like this is going to be a pretty weird one to listen to on Wednesday morning on the way in, especially if you already sort of lived this live. But if you were watching along with us or contributing, thank you for doing that. We appreciate it. there was some really great comments out there and a little bit of banter back and forth. But as far as all that, we're Presbycast. We're going to keep making these silly things for a little while, regardless of who's at old 1600 Pennsylvania. So we'll talk to you in our next episode. Don't be a nerdman.
Don't be an Erdman.
Lament!
Thanks for listening, and stay Presby, weirdos.
Magic on the internet worldwide.